Welcome back to Ray's Talk Show. This is your host, Ray Collazo. Ray's Talk Show, the Latino political talk podcast that raises the voice of the people in our society we don't hear nearly enough from. Thank you so much for joining us. This is your host, Ray Collazo. You can find Ray's Talk Show anywhere you can download a podcast: iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, cualquier sitio you listen to a podcast, or just check us out on social media at Ray's Podcast, or email us your thoughts, ideas, reflections on these conversations that are impacting our society and our world. You can email me at podcastraise@gmail.com. That's podcastraise@gmail.com. As he's with me most weeks, my intrepid co-host from the Perales Report in the Great Northwest, Leo Perales. Leo, welcome back, brother. Always a pleasure to hear from you. And I hear, surprisingly enough, it's rainy in Washington State. What a shocker.
Yeah, and again, I live in the middle of the desert, so I don't know why it's raining so much. But, you can kind of, other than the winter last year was horrible down here, so I'll take this rain over the snow any day of the week. I know that probably you're like, what are you talking about? We get hit harder than you guys. Storm cyclones of snow over there on the East Coast, but so I can't really complain.
I think the Washington sport fan gods are crying tears from the sky because our man Edgar Martinez just missed getting into the Baseball Hall of Fame today. Just probably a dozen or so votes. He got over 70% of the votes. Much respect to our mutual homie Edgar Martinez. So he'll get in there one day. He's a Hall of Famer in our book. Leo, this has been. We're going to talk later in the show. We have updates related to the latest on Puerto Rico. Some updates. I'm sure Leo's going to want to know why I'm discuss a little bit why I'm floating. I'm like walking on cloud 9 over the last few days since Sunday, and we've got some other legislative updates, things happening at Capitol Hill, and some voting in our elections segment. Some very important movement to open the door for our voting rights and provide us more opportunity to express ourselves, which have been actually positive developments. But first, Leo, what we're talking about on social media, amongst immigrant activists, Latino activists, progressive circles, the ongoing drama and battle related to DACA took a disappointing turn earlier this week.
Yeah, there's no other way to describe it other than really that the Democrats caved, and you've definitely seen an outpour of frustration and really just disbelief, because many Latino activists and people in Congress really felt like this fight's been happening for a while now, pretty much ever since Donald Trump decided to descend down that escalator and say he's running for president. So people were gearing up for this fight, and then when he took away DACA back in September, a lot of people look at the future deadline, which is March, but that's the finish line. But we're trying to get something done now. And really, the Democrats, they blinked. They truly caved. But really, at the end of it all, they're going to want Latino leaders, activists, and thought leaders like you and myself, and many others to kind of mobilize our friends and families. Right? It's 2018. Midterms are coming up, but I'm trying to be helpful here. I'm trying to give perhaps the many the people who are involved in the Democratic Party here. Why?
Our job here, Leo, is not to be helpful.
Be real, yeah.
It's to be real. And the reality is, now there is one reality. What the shutdown strategy is a difficult one. And when you're in the minority and you don't control either branch of either the legislative or executive branches, it is a challenge to get many things like this accomplished. But the bottom line is that when you draw a line and then you don't stick to your commitment, you not only create mistrust with your base, in this case the Latino and more notably the progressive base, where this has become a priority issue increasingly, but you also send a clear message to your enemy and your opponents that you're willing to back down. So while the excuses I'm hearing, and I've gotten calls directly from state directors, from Senate offices, people, in this case, Democrats who are supportive of this issue, but ultimately voted on Monday to open the government with this idea, we weren't, this was going to be really hard, and we still can fight in February, but it's going to be really hard. And, we were losing the battle in public opinion. we knew it was going to be really hard. And so, 3 months ago, that's not what Senator Schumer was saying. Senator Schumer was saying, and Democrats were saying, let's get past the Christmas holidays, but January is going to be where we're going to draw the line in the sand no matter what. And so it goes beyond a legislative strategy. It goes about what truly are the values of the Democratic Party, because ultimately, anything significant we're going to do in the area of civil rights in this political climate, it's going to be really, really hard, and most likely not going to be particularly overwhelmingly popular amongst portions of this electorate that that are either conservative or ultimately or openly hostile towards civil rights issues in 2018.
And it really just makes me think of what I've been saying for a while now, and I get flack about it because people feel like I've become more independent, maybe conservative, which is not the truth. I always ask myself, what has the Democratic Party done for Latinos? They've done a lot. I appreciate what President Obama did in his last administration, but he failed a lot on immigration. We had the Democrats had all three levels of government during the first 2 years, and they did nothing. Again, I think we talked about this last week. We appreciate his key legislative achievement with Obamacare, but there's just so many things affecting our community, and I really feel like they have us put them first, and then they inevitably put us last. I mean, they didn't stay in the box and try and hit that heater and try to hit home run out of the park on this. I feel like they should have stuck to their guns. And I actually asked this question on my Facebook page, and I got tons of comments and just saying that a lot of these people, for all intents and purposes, I appreciate their comments, but a lot of the individuals they're not Latino. So they probably don't have a lot of Latino friends and family who are undocumented. And a lot of them have said that, it was a judgment call. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer with what the Democrats did. A lot of them were just kind of giving them some slack, but that's where I come in and say, we can't give the Democratic Party any slack anymore. Can't give the Republican Party any slack no more. Something needs to be done. I mean, you're talking about people's lives at this point, and people have taken the time to understand this issue a little bit better now. Again, people didn't know what DACA was a couple months ago. No one did, and it's fine coming ahead because of who we have for who we have as president. And I mean, something just needs to be done.
And Leo, your frustration, you can hear the frustration in Leo Perales from the Perales Report, who's thousands of miles away from Washington right now, who has friends that are DACA recipients. There's a lot of DACA recipients in his community, and understands this issue, and how it affects real people in their real lives. And that is we can't overstate the amount of frustration, the amount of energy that is being exerted, and sharing that frustration with Latino activists, progressives, Black activists who have gotten more energized around this issue due to the S-hole comments and the blatant anti-Black sentiments that have been expressed by this Black immigrant, anti-Black immigrant comments that have been said by this administration. And so you're seeing this groundswell of frustration, and I'm hearing these conversations and comments on Twitter and in personal conversations, exactly what you just said, Leo. Said, prominent Latino progressives leaving the Democratic Party publicly, people who are expressing this outrage and saying this is a symptom of a bigger issue reflecting the Democrats. What will they stand for ultimately? And you're absolutely right. And I said the same thing in a slightly different way, but you just said, Leo, I said directly to this member of Congress's state director. And I said, the frustrating thing is you're into, the intellectual justification around, well, we got Chip, which is a huge deal. We'll talk about that in a second. And we're still in the mix, but we can't control the House, and we're starting from square one, and all this parliamentary Google speak, all that makes sense on paper, but the reality is, if this party is not willing to go to the wall for these Americans and everything but piece of paper who contribute to our society and really are a portion of a larger community of Latinos and diverse populations in this country, then 6 months later, inevitably what will happen, right? May, June, July, August, September, these same Democrats will be coming to these same communities saying, well, you got to do the right thing. You know, we're better than the alternative. You know, Trump's a terrible person. You know this, you know that. Come on, come on, come on. And then we have to gin up this enthusiasm and basically this electoral salvation for this party, which has not been able to get the majority of the white vote in federal elections since I was peeing in my diapers. So that's the frustration, the angst, the vitriol that we're expressing, because this is just the latest example where we felt let down by Democrats, by Republicans. I mean, let's not forget that what's holding up this process, the biggest thing holding up this process, is an unhinged president that has that gives DACA lip service, but ultimately has an extreme right-wing anti-Latino agenda, and elements of the Republican leadership, whether it's sniveling Stephen Miller in the White House, or Senators Tom Cotton and Perdue in the Senate, or the Freedom Caucus in the House. We've got some very, very bad actors that are building their political lives on being anti-Latino. So we've got a lot. We're fighting many forces, political forces here, that we've got to come to grips with and strategize accordingly.
Really, another thing I guess we can all take from this is that we all live to fight another day. We have another deadline in February, a few weeks away now. But when you take certain bargaining chips off the table, like Chip now, I mean, really, the only thing we have are these dreamers. And I read a comment from one of my friends who lives on the West Side, and he's a dreamer. He attends UW, and he's just talking about how he's having to put his life on hold now. He doesn't know what's going to happen from day to day, and really, I do see. I look into the future and I see something grand happening. I mean, look, we are marching towards perhaps a blue tidal wave, especially with the momentum that we've had from this past year's elections. But we all kind of revert back to again, why should we even vote for you guys? You guys blinked, you caved on this, you're going to cave on something else that we want done, because you can break this all down in regards to these politicians, because these representatives, like I said earlier, are only putting their political livelihood first over Americans. And I say Americans because undocumented people are Americans in any other way. In every sense of the word and way other than on paper. We
have DACA recipients who have businesses that employ hundreds of people. We have people serving our military right now.
We have 20,000 teachers who are undocumented. That was a staggering
20,000
statistic. What are those school districts going to do? What are they going to do? If those people, hey, nothing gets done, they have to get deported. Like, that could be one of my kids' teachers for all I know.
Those are taxpayers. Those are parents. Those are members of our military. Those are college students. Those are graduate students. Those are lawyers. And they're most importantly friends and neighbors and part of the American family. Let me say a message to my Democratic friends is that, even if you assume the argument that they were giving me earlier this week, which I would contest, but let's assume even it was the case that after, a weekend and half a business day, the Democrats were losing the messaging war. Well, first of all, that's your fault. Second of all, nothing you're going to, it's not, at the end of the day, it's not going to be immediately popular because nothing you do that's hard, particularly when it deals with issues of race in this country, LGBT issues, it's never easy. You never are popular in the beginning. I just laugh when I hear these white people on TV, sportscasters, and all these other people, Martin Luther King or Muhammad Ali or any other civil rights icon. I think most white people couldn't stand these people in their day. Thinking about the Colin Kaepernick thing. It's like, well, this is how it was 50 years ago. But needless to say, it wasn't going to be easy. And maybe you lost some political capital, but guess what? When you get things done and you show not only the Republicans, but show the whole country that you have your leaders and you stand for something, that's always going to be good politics at the end. And ultimately it's going to be the right thing to do. So we're going to continue to battle. We have, again, some windows here. Without ultimately the president's leadership, I find it a very difficult path for us to get anything passed on the House side, but we have to continue to fight. And again, our love, our best to our incredible dreamers out there. It's been great to see not only the continued leadership that they're showing, but the fact they're getting recognized and seeing young people like Eric Andiola on MSNBC and others who are showing us, who are be giving a platform to show us their leadership. And you listen to Ray's talk show, the Latino political talk show podcast, and I'm talking to my buddy Leo Perales. Leo, let people know where they can find you on social media and your and a little bit about the Perales Report.
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook, SoundCloud, and on YouTube. Just search Perales Report. I come right up. We talk about all issues: DACA, immigration. We talk about taxes, a lot of things here in the state of Washington, especially here in the state legislature. I interview many political candidates running for office. We on this program and on the Perales Report, we really speak from a person of color perspective and give you our insights. And like I said earlier, we try to be helpful from time to time, but we got to keep it real. So that's where you can find me.
No, that's right. And for those, one of the things that we have to make sure people are aware of is because of the court decision, which actually stopped the Trump administration from carrying out most of the implementation of the DACA rescission memo. Mm-hmm. The people that lost their protections, many of which can now reapply. There's now a new window. So if you know someone that felt they were going to get out of status, there's a possibility they can reapply and renew and extend. So reach out to your local civil rights legal rights organizations, immigration rights organizations, because there's a decent chance that the DACA recipient in your life may be able to continue to extend their status. So we do there's always rays of hope and opportunities, and we have to continue to support our loved ones that are DACA. One thing as it relates to the deal that happened early this week, which I wanted to note, is that fortunately we did get some good news, because as part of the continued resolution that got passed, the funding that needed to authorize CHIP for the next 6 years, CHIP, the Children's Health Insurance Program, which provides health insurance for 9 million poor children in this country, many of which are children of color. I'd say, I believe it's probably close to a third of the CHIP children are Latino kids. So a big impact in our community. But as it relates to health care, the Congress has not, as of yet, either extended the funding for community health centers, the Medicare extenders that provide funding for things like physical and occupational therapy, and increased or have addressed from a funding perspective the opioid epidemic. And as you know, Leo, if you talk about whether it's Middle America, the inner city, across all economic and social and cultural demographics, the opioid crisis is an incredible crisis. And so while these folks are debating and basically playing politics with over 1 million of our young people, they haven't even gotten around, after a year of being in power, to providing support and funding behind the rhetoric behind their so-called concern for victims of the and the families of the victims of the opioid crisis.
Yeah. But those same people will go out in 2018 and still vote for their Republican representatives. And it's astonishing. This president tried to put this issue kind of in the forefront, and he likes to use big words and saying that it was tragic and that these people are going to get help.
He hasn't done shit. And everything he's done is actually going to take healthcare away from them. And, speaking of that, the other healthcare update is that the Department of Health and Human Services is now allowing states to apply for waivers that would actually allow them to provide states to implement work requirements for Medicaid recipients. So Kentucky is the first state that's going to start that they got a waiver. 9 states, including a state that's going to be a continual theme here on Ray's Talk Show, the state of Arizona, which an estimated half the people on Medicaid are Latinos, is applied for the waiver, and presumably they're going to get it. So, not only have they not provided more funding, more support, more resources, more of a focus in terms of the national debate about how to address this issue, but they're actually finding ways to nickel and dime the Medicaid system so that to make it harder for people to even access healthcare.
But that we just kind of touched on it. These people don't understand that, and I just don't get how more of these red states are not blue when you explain certain things that are just essential to living just a normal life, such as having affordable healthcare, able to get access to preventative services. It just doesn't make any sense. And that's incumbent upon people like ourselves, like this podcast, and people who work in those states to tell them the truth and not always watch one channel like a Fox News that tells you that the president's working, he's working hard for you, but at the end of the day, he's taking your chip benefits, or he's taking away, or eventually, especially with this tax bill that just got put down the pike, you're knowing that right now you're going to get a tax cut, but eventually you're going to see a really massive tax increase. It's just sad. And, that's why I appreciate being on a program like this where we're able to talk about these issues and cut through the propaganda that we always see and just tell them, no, this is actually what's going to happen. And I think it's time for you guys to make decisions about who you want to represent you.
Yeah, a couple other, before we get to Hey Ray, a couple of other new news items I wanted to share. The island of Puerto Rico still is under an incredible humanitarian crisis. We still got over a third of the island without electricity. I mean, could you imagine, including schools and hospitals? I mean, places that need electricity, and senior homes. I mean, it's still in crisis mode, and we still have massive amounts of people leaving the island. And so the latest issue, which has come up, is the governor of Puerto Rico has announced that he intends to sell off the utility company PREPA, which is he's saying it's become a boondoggle and has had a lot of management issues. It's a big chunk. Their debt is a big chunk of the overall debt of the island. But activists are very skeptical of the reasons why they're going to be selling off one of the assets of the island, our public electric company, and are just wondering, well, if we're going to privatize the electric company, is that part of the reason why the recovery efforts to restore power have been so slow? There's just a lack of trust, whether it's the Promesa board, the junta that was established before this crisis, the hurricane, to manage the financial affairs of the island, the governor and his administration, which wasn't particularly popular before the hurricane, Governor Rosselló Jr. So there's just a lot of politics being. I did want to mention we actually had some good news as it relates to voting rights and access to getting involved, exercising your civic duty. So in Pennsylvania, my home state, the state Supreme Court voted to rule that our congressional maps that were drawn 7 years ago, by the way, had to be redrawn. They were unconstitutional. And specifically, there is a series of congressional districts in suburban Philadelphia. If you know Philadelphia politics, Chris Hayes on Hardball talks about these communities. Chris Matthews talks about these communities all the time. The Philadelphia suburbs, the Lehigh Valley, central Pennsylvania, which is basically swing communities. These are basically 50-50 communities. Our entire Philadelphia suburban delegation and central Pennsylvania congressional delegation, about 7 or 8 members are Republicans, everything between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, basically. And so even though these are swing communities, they can go either way. So they've determined that these maps, and if you look at them, they're very fugly districts. So they have to be redrawn. And so it looks this year in November, these districts in places like Allentown, Pennsylvania, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, Quakertown, King of Prussia, which have growing Latino communities, will be drawn in a more equitable way. So we have yet another opportunity for Latinos and progressives to pick up some additional congressional seats. And in Florida, we're really happy to announce we have some great friends working on this. Floridians for a Fair Democracy announced that they now have, through their campaign, Florida Second Chances, has enough signatures to get an amendment on the ballot, if passed in November, would restore the constitutional rights of 1.5 million Florida residents to be able to vote, to register to vote. So these are people that have previously served their sentences for felony convictions. And Florida has some of the most draconian laws to basically, once you have a felony, you're never going to be able to vote again if you live in Florida. And so if this is passed through ballot initiative in November, that would change. 1 in 4 African American adults that are eligible to vote, Leo, are prevented from voting in Florida because of this law. It's unbelievable. And so these are the kind of laws, these are the kind of voting rights issues we have to be diligent about. Think about it, Leo. They had to get over 750,000 signatures in Florida over the last 2 years. These kind of tactics, voter suppression, is impacting minority voters, poor voters, the seniors, college students in places like North Carolina, Texas, Arizona, Florida, Pennsylvania. And so it's really important that this activism related to voting rights is a big pillar of our movement moving forward.
Yeah, and I actually but I do have some experience dealing with voter suppression, voting election systems, especially here in Washington. In our area, we actually went through I think I've mentioned this on the program, a full city council election system change over here in Pasco, Washington, where the ACLU came in. They sued the city of Pasco and changed their election system to district-based elections and made the districts themselves more equitable and more fair for Latino voters. So I definitely have some experience in doing that, and this was based off of, actually, if you didn't know, a Yakima court case that happened a couple years ago, and they had to come in and also change that election system too. And it really just, a lot of these systems are unfair, but a lot of people don't question them. They just, this is just the way things are. But then once somebody says, you know what, I don't think that's not the way it should be, like this individual who was actually the campaign organizer over here in Florida, Desmond Meade, who was also a former felon himself, who later became a lawyer. I believe in this stuff. I believe in giving second chances to people who have, paid their debt, they've done their time, and it shouldn't be just the biggest hassle to get your voting rights restored, especially in a state where Donald Trump barely won by 1%, a little over 1% to Hillary Clinton. And so definitely Florida is going to be a battleground state that we need to watch. And
why is California so much different politically than Texas? And I said, well, big part of it, demographic actually pretty similar. But big part of it is that is the process that districts are drawn. And so in California, you have a nonpartisan board, and they have to be vetted, and they have to be, the board has to be diverse, and they have to be people that haven't been lobbyists recently or political hacks. And voila, you get very reasonably drawn districts that reflect the communities of California and Texas. It's strictly a political process that basically white Republicans run because they control the reins of government. So they draw the lines, and you'll get some Latinos and blacks that are packed up in very packed minority, supermajority districts in inner city San Antonio and inner city Houston, inner city Dallas, and a few other places. But it doesn't provide the equitable power that we should have, that would truly reflect the politics of the state, demographics of the state. I would argue, in voter ID issues and gerrymandering, I would argue you have almost an apartheid situation in Texas. And you saw that during that process of the bogus voter integrity commission that Chris Kobach was running. They were at some point trying to get access to the database of every Hispanic surname in Texas. Did you see that? You talk about this is like the KGB is running this country at this point. It's very scary.
First thing off, it really was kind of hidden in the headlines for the last couple of weeks, but it has came out that President Donald Trump paid off a porn star with some hush money. What is your take on that? And I want to know why it hasn't been bigger news.
If this had been any other president, any other time, this would have been the biggest story of not just of the day, of a generation. It has everything and every juicy, salacious detail you can imagine. The bottom line is that, this president's strategy of manipulation, power, control is chaos, and to throw so much at us that it's hard for us to decipher what we should focus on, makes us almost numb to some of these issues. At the end of the day, it's not the biggest deal in the world for a powerful man, to have an affair. We don't know the personal, the reality is we don't know what Melania and, we don't know about their personal life and what she's agreed upon and what is the expectation within their relationship. So at the end of the day, it's not the biggest deal in the world, but it just goes to show how low this president has lowered our standards as a country when it's not that big a deal. That being said, how she got paid and through what monies and was it campaign money and what resource, that transparency needs to come to light, because indeed the payment could be some sort of ethics or campaign finance violation.
Yeah, it just seems like things don't matter anymore. I try to think about it in terms of if that was President Barack Obama and man,
oh my God,
they would
have. Oh my God, if he paid a blonde porn star, oh my God.
Well, lastly, I know I can't believe, a couple of weeks ago, those Eagles came down to Seattle and they came to the clean. And in my opinion, they got their butt whooped, and I felt like we were turning. The Seahawks were turning to make that another Super Bowl run. Well, that didn't happen, and so let's come back to reality. And the Philadelphia Eagles are in the Super Bowl. That does not sound good coming off my tongue. Tell me,
man, it sounds lovely. Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl 52 to be exact. And the Seahawks had a nice season. You guys just kind of injuries caught up to you, but you're getting a little old in the tooth on the defensive side. But let me tell you, this is a very resilient ball club. It is truly the definition of team. To get to the Super Bowl with a backup quarterback, I mean, even if he's a good backup quarterback, I mean, Nick Foles,
he was good. He's good.
I mean, I just couldn't get over how good he looked Sunday. I was just rubbing my eyes because, I mean, he just stepped up the best time at the most opportune time possible. Minnesota's got a good team, and we just smoked them. And let me tell you, I'll have my formal prediction next week. But needless to say, I am feeling very, very good, my friends. So on to Minnesota, so we can pester Viking fans yet some more.
Yeah. Well, one more quick one. If Mick Foles wins on next Sunday, and I'm pretty sure in your mind they're going to win, is it a Tom Brady situation now again? Carson Wentz is hurt. This guy comes in, he wins it. I mean, is Nick Foles the starter for next year?
No, we won't have a quarterback controversy. Now, from a tactical perspective, he is under contract another year. So, assuming he wins the Super Bowl, obviously he probably could be dangled out for a trade. We could get a second round pick or something. But the reality is, with an ACL injury, with Carson Wentz, and the idea that we probably don't want to rush him back, regardless of what happens from Sunday, I think there's a good chance Foles is the backup and probably starts the first few games next year. So, yeah. And then after that, he can go get paid. Now, if he wins the Super Bowl and has a big performance, I could see where his agent's going to want to get traded to a team that'll give him, make him the starter. But these are good problems to have, my friend. Let me tell you. When you're telling me these are the controversies I have to worry about with my team, I'm feeling very good about my birds.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm pulling for you guys. I like Tom Brady. I'm sorry to say that, but I'm definitely pulling for the Eagles because my heart goes out to Carson Wentz. He definitely did the bulk of the work this year, and for him to get hurt and may have to sit on the sidelines and see his team win the Super Bowl.
Let me tell you, it was bittersweet. I remember texting my brothers when they were giving the trophy, the conference championship trophy to the Eagles. I said, man, make sure Carson needs to be standing right there. And he eventually got up there. He had to hobble up there with the cane. But he was like to the side, and I felt kind of bad. But at the end of the day, let me tell you, Carson's a great guy. I have to give him a lot of credit. He after Trump's asshole comments, put a very nice post in support of the Haitian people. He's gone there for humanitarian work in the past. And I think, he knows, hey, he's got a whole career in front of him. This is a magic moment for Nick Foles, another Christian, another man of Christ. They're very close. So the chemistry, the energy in Philadelphia right now with the team and with the community is just at an all-time high. With all the political stuff happening, this has brought people together. Like, our thoughts are prayers with two families who lost civil rights and progressive icons this past week. Paul Booth, one of the senior executives, basically the right-hand person of the president, Lee Saunders of AFSCME, one of America's largest labor unions, passed away suddenly of leukemia last week. This is a man, Leo, that was one of the leaders of the anti-war movement in the 60s and has been a labor and progressive organizing icon for his entire life. He passed suddenly. His wife, Heather Booth, who I work with very closely on various progressive causes, actually got arrested. Was one of the people that got arrested, one of the DACA protesters the day last week. So the day her husband passes away, suddenly she's getting arrested for young Latinos of another generation. These two are just have done incredible. Heather and Paul, incredible servants to our country. So much love to Heather and to Paul Booth. The one time I spent time in his office, he actually was showing off his these Puerto Rican vejigante masks that are very prominent in Puerto Rican culture. Showing off these masks he was gifted the times he's gone to Puerto Rico, and it means a lot to me because my mother's an asked me remember. So much respect to Paul Booth and a Latina icon with a very interesting political history, Romana Acosta Banuelos, the first Latina U.S. treasurer, died at 92 years old. She was the U.S. treasurer under the Nixon administration, Leo. And this woman was as a child deported, even though she was a U.S. citizen in the 1920s as part of that anti-Latino wave. Eventually relocated in the United States and eventually became a thriving business owner, a tortilla maker kingpin, and then opened her own Latino-run bank in Southern California. It became the U.S. treasurer in 1971. So a Latina historical figure, Romana Acosta Banuelos, one of pioneering presidential cabinet member, appointee level person. So a loss of an icon. What an incredible history. Nixon had a Latina who counted the money. Unbelievable. So thank you all so much for listening to Ray's Talk Show. We have to continue to put the pressure. I continue to admire the leadership of all these different movements in our community. The women's marches were incredibly successful and wildly underreported over the weekend. Our DACA students, our Puerto Rican activists, our progressive activists fighting a good fight in all these areas. So let's continue to support them, not only with our thoughts and our sympathies, but let's take action ourselves. Let's join these protests. Let's call our members of Congress. You know, the DACA deal is still not dead, so we have to do everything we can. And in the midst of all this, they still haven't funded additional relief for the island of Puerto Rico. They've actually, been withholding some of the initial funds that they committed because they saw Puerto Rico has money. This is an island, $70 billion in debt, and they say we don't need the money. Unbelievable. But Leo, we'll definitely be talking soon, and we'll keep the conversation going on social media. Do you like the new audio little video snippets we're doing, Leo?
I love that. I was going to tell you,
they're getting good reaction out there. People like them.
No, they're short and sweet and good to eat. You got to put up stuff like that so people can watch it and at least get that little snippet. And hopefully they go down to they go on Stitcher, Spotify, any place, anywhere you can find a podcast. You can find Ray's podcast and get more of this great show.
That's right. I appreciate that, Leo. And I'll definitely share with you the tool that I'm using so you can utilize it for your stuff too. Thank you so much, Leo. Appreciate you, and thank you all so much for listening to Ray's Talk Show. See the conversation on social media, and have a wonderful week.